they're ready. Just don't click the button if you're not ready. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to round number 2 of our 5th Casuals tournament. This time we are on series. I am still Blues here with Urand,
Hello.
and this map seems a little more generous than last time.
And by a little, I'd say quite a bit.
Is Urand here?
Oh, I am here. Hello.
All right.
I'm sorry, I remapped my my push to talk button. Still instinctively pressing the old one.
And it's
So yeah, there's a lot more iron. It's much easier to not go nomad.
can definitely still go nomad. It's not great. This silicon is usable, but not special. Evil Diablo taking a decent spot for that.
I'm a little bit concerned about it because it's going to degrade and it's only a medium.
Right, long term, that part might be a problem. And I don't really know how I feel about the second HQ found either. It is near the aluminum, that's nice. The uranium isn't going. I doubt it's going to be all that important. We already have Zorbaz collecting some right there. The medium high are right in the middle of the map, so someone will probably go for them at some point.
I think it's mostly fine. You do have access to water. The only big problem becomes actually putting your buildings down because both farms are a little bit have a bit of a problem with the open space.
You're definitely going to end up with a few clusters. I guess one nice thing about the second found, if you get frozen out on your silicon in the other location, you still have some that you can move into. Well, as for everyone else, Pop's doing a pretty standard opening. I don't know how I feel about going for the high uranium right away. We already have 2 players in uranium, so it doesn't feel all that necessary. Although there, I guess, isn't a hugely important second market to go into. Other market, rather.
It's probably fine. He's expensive. He can probably afford it. It is the only high uranium on the map that is within any reach. Probably the only high uranium period.
Now Morgan is actually in a pretty interesting spot here. Didn't notice when he found it, but he has this medium water with a bunch of caves next to it, 3 caves. And as a scavenger, he can just abuse those caves as much as he wanted to slant drill off that and have a really nice source of water without all that much work.
And the good thing is that no one else has claimed any of the caves, so no one can sabotage his tile, which I'm not sure if it works that way. I imagine it does.
Yeah, you can definitely diminish a scavenger's resource by slant drilling off of it, and it is probably just a pure mistake for Zorbaz not to have put one of those 2 water pumps down onto the cave where Morgan's reactor is, because he could have done that. The tile wasn't claimed right away, I don't think. Anyway, claim auction. Should go pretty high on series.
Yeah, I imagine that power is... Well, actually, people are moving into... Well, not just Pops, who's... Oh no, Evil Diablo is also moving into power, so... I don't know what the dead situation is going to be, but I imagine that it's not going to be great for Zorbaz.
The claim definitely helps Pops. As it was, he was going to be in the 2 nuclear plants and just a single steel mill. This definitely lets him actually produce steel, which turns out he's going to need. Not getting a ton of help off with steel production either, although I guess Zorbaz, after the upgrade, is moving into a ton of steel.
Which is still a problem, because he's the one who needs to be making power. And Morgan gets the cave, so yeah. At this point he's just super well set up for water unless a random Nucotile auction comes up.
Right, and there are a lot of other things to like about Morgan's position. He can pretty much just ignore power at this point, I think. It's on its way down. He doesn't have a ton of debt at this point. Can just feel pretty safe about going to glass. Long term, we already have 3 people in uranium, so the uranium price is likely to stay under control. It's just more claims Morgan never has to worry about.
Which is exactly what you want as a scavenger, is not to worry about the input resources. So Pops is the last to upgrade.
No big surprise there with the big move into power more than anyone else.
It's probably something he needs, but there's a big question as to whether that actually is keeping his debt under control, because all that power is not making him life support.
Right. I mean, at the time it was helping a bunch. Then the 20k auction, this overload just really put a wrench in those plans. Moving into the reactors now will be good, though.
And it looks like the non-steel users are ahead in upgrades as they should be. And yeah, I'm just kind of concerned about Morgan, not in the sense that he's doing bad. He's doing great. I'm concerned from everyone else's perspective.
And I think as Morgan, I'd be very interested in making a pathway into chems, probably out of these glass kilns, and then maybe looking into picking up teleportation or something along those lines. Because I think eventually he will want to move out of some of this carbon. Having the 3 carbon tiles committed is always a bit more than you're comfortable with as a scavenger.
Well, he can, even without teleportation, he can probably just easily transition 2 lows into something else.
That is fair. It is reasonably close. There are only pirates on the board, so even if you're shipping things in, you can time it so that pirates catch a lot of carbon. Which actually might not be a bad thing for other players later if they don't pick up a lot of carbon. So far it looks like Pops and Evil Diablo both have carbon. So that's unlikely to be a huge problem, as long as they expand into the second lows.
So, with people kind of crushing power a little bit more than I expected them to, Zorbas is actually in a fine position. Although he did move, okay, he did move into nuclear plants, so for him it's just a matter of actually getting upgraded at this point. And
Right.
I think people should really start using tile auctions, because you do need more claims somehow.
Right, most of these players are fairly low on debt. Power is staying somewhat under control, so it's unlikely to skyrocket their debt soon. Though power is climbing now with all these overloads dropping. But yeah, definitely, tile auctions would be a good source of extra claims that are fairly affordable.
Especially for Zorbaz, because he, unlike Evil Diablo, is not making any power cash, and he doesn't have that much debt, so he can easily afford to spend some extra on a claim. And he really needs more claims as a robot.
Moving into this extra iron is definitely a good start for what Zorbaz needs. Definitely needs to knock down the steel price a bit and get to HQ5 reasonably quickly. Also really wants to get down any sort of life support next to his water. Everything is just really good in those markets. I'm not quite sure what the holdup is. There we go. Reactors.
So far, it looks like a fairly close game, I'd say. Everyone is still definitely in it. Some people are a little more ahead, some some people have more long-term advantages.
Right. Maybe a little bit concerned about Morgan. I guess, I mean, he's still in a perfectly fine position. Just feels like he slipped a bit further back. He is going to this optimization center. That'll be very helpful. The Pleasure Dome is okay right now. 249 is solid, but I feel like there's probably more money to be made in any of these markets.
I'd be interested in optimization centers for basically everyone.
That is probably true most games. Optimization centers are amazing and people should use them all the time.
The black market is online.
More or less. Yeah, Evil Diablo has been on HQ5 for a while, has a fair amount of Clash Plus resources, not using it to get into any advanced buildings. And that's definitely a concern.
Well, we can see what the plan is based on the resources they have stockpiled. 100 electronics, 90 glass.
I don't think you need me to tell you that I'm not a fan of this plan.
Well, this is series, so I'm not a fan either.
I mean, right now, launches are already fairly profitable. 36k for an oxygen launch, but again, that is an oxygen launch. That price will jump a lot. It'll be hard to keep that under control and profitable. Food up at $500 is also solid, but you're going to need some optimizations to go along with that.
One word in defense for this plan is that he is a nomad and silicon is relatively cheap. Very relatively, but cheap. And he has all the silicon he needs anyway. So he can build this off-world much cheaper than Pop's food, for instance.
Yeah, there is that. Although Pops is also expansive, so you can get a decent off-world up.
Yeah, I guess, but still.
And, well, we'll see what happens with Evil Diablo's plan with Morgan's aggression. Morgan is nowhere close to actually finishing the buy.
Yeah, but he's making sure that Evil Diablo doesn't do anything with his cash, so it's still a good move, I think.
It's a solid move for slowing Evil Diablo down. I'm always concerned about that sort of move, just in terms of you don't know whether or not that's actually going to be the target you want to fight with long term. We already see how it's backfiring in some ways with Zorbaz poking in and getting out right away. No long-term harm. But Evil Diablo ends up putting up his off-world anyway. Doesn't end up accomplishing a whole lot. It's an interesting idea, though, certainly.
Yeah, well, he poked the bear a little bit, but then he retreated in time. I don't think they're setting up a rivalry necessarily. Or at least they should be mindful of Pops Your Socks, because he's still an expansive and he can still definitely come back, even though he's in DDET and generally having some problems.
Yeah, not all that deeply in DDET, but definitely needs to do something to get out of there.
Well, the keyword is yet, I think.
Yeah, I'm not really comfortable with this single nuclear plant by itself. Would be nice if you had a friend. Would be nice if maybe you picked up some patents. A lot of things along those lines. He definitely has this nice optimization center going, at least.
I think at this point I'm most concerned with Zorbaz, because he's the only one who is not moving into advanced buildings. Though actually I take it back, he's moving into an optimization center, so we're about even with everyone else on advanced buildings. When the game is generally going fairly even-ish, no one is running away too hard, you do want to look out for who has what advanced building stuff.
Well, that was an interesting series of events. Morgan using our first tile auction of the game, picking up a tile adjacent to his base for 40k, plunging him into CDET, getting a friend for his nuclear plant. He deleted his other nuclear plant so he could put an off-world under the Goon. I was okay. Well, we were both concerned about the Evil Diablo's off-world. I feel a bit more concerned about Morgan's, just because it was significantly more expensive by this point. I guess carbon is still
Well,
cheap, but glass and electronics have risen a lot.
Market is open for business.
I think these are the last off-worlds that can happen on this map that are kind of reasonable. Anyone who tries to build an off-world from now on is likely going to just straight up lose money.
Our methods continue to improve.
Sounds about right. It is interesting to me that Morgan has put all these optimizations into food and isn't really using that. I think he should be preparing for the transition into auto-launching food. Long term, that should be his goal. But so far, we haven't seen that.
It's time to put those two low carbon quarries to some use by transitioning them. I mean the tiles under those quarries.
I would probably transition those into.
Optimization
Eh,
routines
I was going to say into glass, but
Close.
at this point, silicon is crazy.
Well, he has quite well optimized glass production, so it's actually kind of reasonable to transition them into glass and move your glass three glass claims into food.
Yeah, I guess that is doable. Maybe electronics would also work. So, I mentioned earlier in the game how, since there's so many people in uranium, that price was going to be fairly reasonable. Turns out I was completely wrong. It still shouldn't be up at $150. We have two players that could easily transition into triangles of lows. Evil Diablo making that first move into a pair should serve him very nicely.
Well, Morgan is unfortunately in a bit of a difficult situation now with his debt,
Yep,
which he
D-Debt.
actually repaid.
Yeah, he kind of needed to since his goon got popped. Evil Diablo already had this dynamite prepared.
Launch affirmative. What a payout.
That's a good point, because I was gonna say how I'm not really happy with that. I would much rather seen him buy a stock in Evil Diablo.
Well, looks like they're both just gonna keep dynamiting each other's off-worlds.
Isn't
Not
that
gonna
fun?
last too much longer with dynamite at 30k.
So Evil Diablo is in the hacker array, and I assume he's the one who is making the silicon hack.
Indeed.
It's a good hack.
The only other player in Silicon is Morgan, and he does not have a stockpile since he was invested in that glass market for so long.
Pops does have a single low, but it's basically negligible.
It's miles away. I think it's just getting started on production, or it could have
Yeah,
just.
possibly.
Speaking of Pops and debt problems, he is still solidly in debt. Never really quite took care of that. And I'm not sure what Evil Diablo's doing at this point. Sold out of Morgan, buying into Zorbaz. Zorbaz is scary with that large amount of cash that is really probably just largely a product of being a robot. Which is just a huge advantage on series, not having to pay these high life support prices, making so much extra money off of that.
Yeah, I am really concerned. I assume he's hoping for everyone else to turn their attention to Zorbaz, because look, he has so much money. But if Morgan can actually scrape enough cash to buy out Evil Diablo, then he can still be in a reasonable position. The problem is I don't think he can.
Yeah, it was definitely a big gamble from Evil Diablo. Maybe thinking that he wouldn't be able to outrace Morgan, trying to get into Zorbaz, maybe trying to get Zorbaz to attack Morgan, give himself a shot that way, but it's still just a very tangled mess. And there's really no reason for Zorbaz to go after Morgan when he could just buy out Evil Diablo. I guess it's more expensive.
Well, he is making a lot of cash, so he's actually looking very good on the whole buying Zorbas out plan. I'm not really sure why Zorbas didn't choose to defend. Could be just he maybe missed the fact that he's being bought out.
Right, definitely is odd, especially considering last game when he got impressive and defended himself, really, and that really paid off for him. This time,
Congratulations.
kind of sitting back a bit.
He's basically committing the same mistake as Adderfield last game, except I think it's even a little bit worse this time.
Optimization routine successful.
That's probably right. It's also interesting that Zorbaz is just sitting on this dynamite when he should probably know that Evil Diablo's offworld isn't gooned, or if not, just drop a 20k spy to check.
Or even just power of less Overload. He does have the cooldown on the black market right now.
I mean, maybe Zorbaz is AFK. That would make some sense.
That actually would, because, well,
The black market is open for
he
business.
might as well not return. It's fine.
Also a bit odd to me that Pops is chain hacking Uranium in particular. Maybe not really noticing that a few other players are producing a fair amount. It's not a market he has to himself. And the price is kind of fluctuating during the shortage, and that's always a bad sign.
Well, actually, if you look at it, no one is really making that much. The only reason Zorbaz is making a good amount is because his nuclear plants are overloaded.
I mean, Evil Diablo is making +2 a second. It isn't a ton, but Pops is also just only a 0.5 a second, so...
Oh wait, Pops is hack. I'm
Market
sorry,
misinformation in
yeah,
progress.
then
The engineers have
you're
advanced
right.
their production.
I guess Pops is also muling Uranium, which helps, but still a bit of an awkward play.
Yeah, I'd be looking at.
Continue to improve.
Oh, good lord. Guess electronic hacks? That's kind of ridiculous with the electronics price.
Yeah, there's nothing particularly great to hack. Maybe at this point, with Zorbaz being a subsidiary, I might look at something like steel or iron, but even that doesn't feel very good.
Well, hacking against the
Optimization routine
subsidiary is
successful.
generally a little awkward.
Yeah, especially and the black market is so expensive. You
Black
can't even
market is
freeze the
online.
subsidiary and get things done that way.
So yeah, so Evil Diablo was kind enough to buy Zorbaz for Morgan, potentially, if Morgan can actually make the money.
The engineers
He
have
does have
advanced
the
their
stock
production.
advantage, he has basically better territory, I want to say. He does not have a great subsidiary though, and that might be
I
much
mean,
better than whatever he has.
it's solid. 1k a second is
The
nothing
black
to sneeze
market
at.
is open for business.
But right, definitely a bit concerned for Morgan. Definitely seemed to stall out a bit there. Part of it because of all the dynamites onto the offworld. One of the reasons why offworlds are always just a risky investment,
The
even
black
if
market is online.
the
The
prices
black
look
market
good.
is open for business.
I'm guessing Zorbaz just got back.
Our methods continue to improve.
Also interesting to note that Evil Diablo and Morgan seem to have switched debt situations.
That is quite interesting, actually. I don't know if I'm happy with that, though, because Morgan needs a lot of cash, but he's getting there.
It's gonna be close, but I think Evil Diablo should still have. Actually, no. Evil Diablo's Offworld just blown up. What is his launch progress? Morgan's gonna get a launch off. Evil Diablo
Optimization
probably
routine
won't.
successful.
And that should be pretty big. Pop's meanwhile building up a truly, truly large amount of cash. I'm not sure it ends up mattering, unfortunately. He'll probably need somewhere in the nature of 1.2 million to take out the winner of this fight. Actually,
The
probably even
engineers
more
have
than that.
advanced up.
And he's a long way off from that.
Yeah, I don't think he just has the resources to get there in time, even though his cash pile is pretty impressive.
Yeah, really just taking a bit too long to catch back up in this game.
You would not believe who we caught red-handed.
Well, they both have the buy, I think. And, well,
That probably shouldn't have happened that way. Seems like Pops maybe wanted to buy out Morgan. I don't think that would have been worthwhile in any way. But wouldn't have made a real difference. Morgan would have costed something like 700k. He would get, I think, 2 stock into Evil Diablo, a bit of a cash refund. And at the end of the day, he'd still be really massively behind.
yeah, I'm afraid that Pops didn't really have a very good way to get back into the game. He just kind of got a lot of debt, got behind, didn't make the didn't have good advanced buildings really. At the end of the day,
And
somehow these offroads were amazing.
Make room
the
for
two
the progress.
optimization centers got a lot done for him. I think they were a very nice investment. Offworlds actually did a surprising amount of work, 450k for Morgan, only 257 for Evil Diablo. But I feel like once you consider also just all the cost of the defending them, of rebuilding them, those numbers get a lot less impressive.
Well, they were still the two people who were ahead and who were winning the game.
I mean, to be fair, Zorbaz
Yeah, that's a good point.
probably. Right, at this point, Evil Diablo should just easily take this. Needs a lot less to finish things off. Pops has actually moved into a second hacker array,
Launched. Look
which
at
is
all the
fun,
money.
but ultimately
The
irrelevant.
black market is online.
Is that is the best way for him to actually try to get the money. At least in theory.
Right. In practice, the second hacker array doesn't even finish building by the time it gets bought. Soul 28. Oh, that